This is the largest group of people ever assembled in one place. The important thing that you've proven to the world is that 500,000 kids, and I call you kids because I have children older than you are, 500,000 young people can get together and have 3 days of fun and music, and have nothing but fun and music, and I God bless you for it.
The 1960s marked the beginning of the hippie counterculture, coining the popular phrase and ideology, "If it feels good, do it." Little did anyone know this era of political duress and moral ambiguity would begin an unprecedented search for truth, justice, and life. All across America, hippies began flocking to Jesus. Thus, the Jesus movement began as people like John Lloyd surrendered their hearts to Jesus. John would find that Jesus could transform his life, and because of that, the only right response was to serve God with everything he had, even if that meant leaving behind a good professional job for a life of ministry.
The pastor asked if I'd like to start a coffee house reaching out to hippies in Fort Wayne. And so, much to my parents' dismay, I left my professional job where I was making pretty good bucks at the time, and to start this coffee house for $100 a week. And I didn't even know what we were going to do there.
With no real plan, John, along with a few others, launched out into what God was asking them to do. They navigated their way through the terrain of hippie culture, shining their light for Christ as they began a coffee shop ministry called the Adam's Apple.
You know, there was no contemporary Christian music back there, or very little in 1970. That's when this happened. Yeah, I'm an old guy. And so we went down, we remodeled it. They had a stretch of buildings that backed up to the old Erie Canal in Fort Wayne. And some of you that live in this area in Indiana and that Madison, Indiana has buildings like that, big brick buildings, warehouses that backed up to the Erie Canal, and we made it into a coffee house. And I didn't even know what we were going to do there. I mean, I don't know what we were going to do. I didn't have any idea. And this band came in and said, "Man, can we like play in your coffee house, man?" And I said, "Well, what are you guys into?" You know, long hair and the whole thing. And they said, "Oh man, man, like Moody Blues man," and you know, and so I said, "Well, how about Jesus? You guys into Jesus?" They said, "Oh yeah, man, we're into Jesus, man. We think he's really cool. So we read the Arancha book, and we believe he's an interplanetary space traveler." I'm telling you the truth. And I said, "Well, listen, we'll just talk about this a little later, okay?" And so they played some secular songs. And then I just get up and I just share my testimony and talk about the Lord. And these other people from the art school and some of these young people were there on staff, and we just witnessed to people. And then some other bands kept coming in. And by the way, all those guys in that band got saved and became Christian musicians. One of them became the drummer with Petra, who became really about the first nationally known Christian rock band at the time. And they had moved to Fort Wayne just to be a part of our ministry. And so things really started happening. That summer, there were so many kids coming, we couldn't get them in. There'd be more people outside. There'd be 1,000 kids maybe a night trying to get into that space. And Dr. Pano had said that summer that in their records that he thought we'd baptized about 600 kids that summer. So man, a real revival broke out. It was the place to hang out. Petra became our house band, you know, that was nationally known Christian rock group, and it was happening. And groups came from all over the country. Whenever they'd tour, they'd come through and they'd stop. And that, you know, there were people like, you know, Phil Kagi didn't live that far away. He came pretty often.
That old man time, they're running out, and you'll see eventually. When the Lord stops, and that'll be it. Too late for apology.
that place would pack out, on Friday nights, and I would always share the word and always do an altar call. So we'd have some worship time, the band would come and play, and then after that, I would preach a short, message that was really salvation oriented, and then kids would get saved. And we just did free will offerings to support it, to pay for the band, and kids would come from all over the tri-state area of Indiana, Michigan, Ohio.
John, with his artistic and musical abilities, had an open door at the college nearby. He would often go there to share his testimony and lead others to Jesus. Due to the high number of people converting to Christianity, Adam's Apple was well over capacity. John was able to see remarkable things happen in some of the most unexpected circumstances.
I'll never forget this one experience. We had a group that was from New York City, and they were 4 black girls. They were attractive girls, and we had advertised that they were going to be there with us, and they were supposed to be there on a Friday night. Well, on Wednesday night, we had a prayer meeting that was there, and while we were having our prayer meeting, these 3 black guys, they came in, and they were real awkward. They didn't know. They had on plaid suits, stack shoes, wide brim hats, and they came in, and we didn't have chairs. Hippies sat on the floor back then, and everybody sat on the floor, and they came in real awkward, and didn't know what was going on. They was expecting to hear this group that was going to play, and they saw their posters we'd put up, and they were attractive girls, so they came. So as I found out later that the guy that was the head there, the ringleader, that his dad was a pastor, and that he had died, but he'd prayed for him, and I can say his name, that the man was named Willie Bolden, and that Willie sat down, and the Spirit of God touched him, and he started crying. And these other guys thought he was running some kind of scam. I mean, these guys carried guns, man. They were into bad stuff, They sold women, they sold dope, and who knows what else. I don't even want to ask them everything they did back then, But Willie really gave his heart to Jesus.
John's experience with one of the greatest shifts in culture in American history is one to be remembered for years to come. His testimony is a reminder of how relevant our faith is through even the greatest cultural changes. John leaves us with this thought.
Don't tell me it's boring to be a Christian. And it is exciting. But it's boring if you just sit in a church every week and don't do anything. That's boring. But when you get involved and your gifts that you have start to come forth, and you have a pastor that will begin to use you and plug you in, and you grow, as you prove yourself and who you are and you're faithful, it is really exciting. There's no end to it, the things that God has and what He wants to unfold in your life. You're not going to be much good to God if you walk around with a long face and you're miserable all the time. God wants to put a joy in your heart, and it'll come from serving Him and walking in His will.